When someone withdraws or creates distance in a relationship, it is easy to assume they are rejecting love altogether. We often interpret their silence as disinterest or their hesitation as coldness, but this is rarely the full story. People who lean toward avoidant behavior are not incapable of love, nor are they inherently unloving. What they are doing, often without realizing it, is protecting themselves from the deep vulnerability that intimacy requires. Love demands openness. It demands exposure of our fears, our insecurities, and our unmet needs. For someone who has learned to equate closeness with danger, that exposure feels less like connection and more like a threat. It is not love they resist, it is the risk that love brings. This protective instinct often comes from early experiences where closeness was unpredictable, inconsistent, or overwhelming. An avoidant may have grown up in an environment where expressing needs led to disappointment, or where independence was rewarded and vulnerability dismissed. Over time, the nervous system adapts. Instead of running toward love, the avoidant runs towards safety, and safety is found in control, in self-reliance, and in creating enough emotional distance to keep from being hurt. When a partner reaches out, the avoidant does not necessarily think, "I do not want this love." The thought is closer to, "If I let this in, I might lose myself, and that is too costly." Understanding this truth changes the narrative. Rather than seeing avoidance as rejection, we can see it as protection. The avoidant is trying to preserve their sense of stability, even if it comes at the cost of closeness. This is why many avoidants struggle with contradictory desires. They long for connection and intimacy, but when it arrives, their defenses rise. The very thing they crave becomes the very thing they push away, creating a painful cycle for both themselves and their partner. This cycle is not evidence that they do not care. It is evidence that caring is so overwhelming it threatens to destabilize them. When we look at avoidance through this lens, compassion becomes possible. If you are in a relationship with someone who pulls back, it helps to remember that their behavior is not about you being unworthy of love. It is about their need to feel safe while loving. Chasing them or demanding closeness often backfires, not because they do not want love, but because the pressure heightens their fear of vulnerability. The better path is to create an environment where openness is not forced, but invited, where they can step forward at their own pace. Safety, patience, and consistency are the keys that unlock the walls avoidants build around themselves. For avoidants themselves, the challenge is to recognize that protection and avoidance are not the same as peace. Keeping love at a distance may feel safer, but it also creates loneliness and dissatisfaction. Protecting oneself from vulnerability comes with the hidden cost of protecting oneself from the very experiences that bring joy and meaning. Growth begins when the avoidant realizes that vulnerability, though risky, is not the same as danger. It is the bridge to the closeness they secretly want. By learning to trust in small steps, by allowing moments of openness, they can discover that love does not always require losing themselves. It can, in fact, strengthen their sense of self. So the truth is not that avoidants are cold or uncaring. The truth is that they are guarding a tender heart that has learned to survive by minimizing exposure. Their distance is not the absence of love, but the armor built around it. When we recognize this, we stop labeling them as incapable of love and start seeing them as people in need of reassurance, patience, and gentle encouragement. And when avoidants themselves embrace this understanding, they open the door to experiencing the very connection they have been longing for all along. When people look at avoidance in relationships, they often assume that the constant pulling away, the silence, or the hesitations are all signs that they don't want love at all. But that assumption is not only misleading, it is deeply unfair. The truth is, avoidants are not running from love. They are running from the fear that love will strip away their sense of safety. For them, the idea of being fully open and vulnerable carries the risk of being controlled, smothered, or judged. And so they create distance, not because they don't want to be close, but because they are protecting something very precious to them, their independence, their freedom, and their peace of mind. What they truly crave is not a wall between themselves and others, but a safe container where love can exist without turning into a prison. Safety in a relationship means knowing that they can show up without being suffocated by expectations. It means being accepted for who they are, without pressure to constantly perform, explain, or meet demands that go against their nature. It means having a partner who understands that closeness doesn't have to mean control and affection doesn't have to mean ownership. For the avoidant, love that feels safe is love that lets them breathe. That kind of love does not push them into constant reassurance or force them to share every hidden thought before they are ready. It gives them room to step closer at their own pace without the fear of being consumed. Deep down, avoidants long for intimacy like anyone else. They may not show it in obvious ways, but the desire is there beneath the protective layers. They want to feel held, supported, and understood. They want connection, but they want it to coexist with independence. The problem is that too often the people who love them misinterpret their hesitation as rejection. When an avoidant takes space, it is seen as abandonment. When they withdraw, it is read as coldness. But in reality, much of it comes from fear. They fear that if they let someone all the way in, they will lose their ability to say no, to set boundaries, to stand on their own 2 feet. That fear is not a lack of love. It is the deep hope that love can exist without taking away the self. When we truly understand this, everything changes. Instead of chasing after an avoidant or demanding more than they can give, we can offer what they really need: reassurance that they can be loved without losing themselves. This doesn't mean lowering standards or accepting emotional neglect. It means recognizing that love grows best in an environment of respect and balance. If closeness is paired with freedom, if commitment is paired with trust, then the avoidant no longer has to run. They begin to feel that it is safe to stay, safe to open up, and safe to invest themselves in the relationship. So the shocking truth is that avoidants don't want distance at all. They want safety. They want to know that love doesn't have to hurt, that intimacy doesn't have to mean losing their voice, that connection doesn't have to come at the cost of independence. When they find a relationship that gives them space to breathe, they stop retreating into distance. They stop running. And what emerges is not just a stronger bond, but a love that is both deeply connected and beautifully free. They secretly long for intimacy, but only when it allows them to keep their independence. This is a truth that is often misunderstood because at first glance, avoidants appear as if they are rejecting connection altogether. They seem distant, distracted, and resistant to closeness. But beneath that protective shell lies the same human longing that we all share: the desire to be truly seen, to be understood, and to feel safe in the arms of another person. The difference is that their longing comes with a condition. It must never cost them their sense of self. For an avoidant, intimacy is not about merging into one, but about standing side by side, holding hands while still being able to breathe freely. The reason independence matters so deeply to avoidants is because somewhere along the way, they were taught, whether through experience, upbringing, or past relationships, that closeness meant a loss of control. It meant giving up their boundaries. It meant surrendering their freedom. And so, they learned to build a wall, not because they didn't want love, but because they were afraid of what love might demand from them. To them, intimacy without independence feels like a trap. It feels like suffocation. It feels like being consumed by someone else's expectations. And for a person wired this way, that fear is enough to make them retreat before they even have the chance to feel the joy of connection. Yet here's the paradox. Avoidants are often the ones who long for intimacy the most. They are the ones who want to be held, but in their own time. They want to open up, but in their own way. They want to share their soul, but only with someone who will respect their need for space. It's not that they want less love, it's that they want love on terms that do not erase them. And when they find a partner who understands this, someone who knows that independence is not a threat, but a part of who they are, the avoidant begins to soften. They begin to let down the walls, brick by brick, and they begin to allow intimacy to feel safe instead of dangerous. What avoidants are really searching for is balance. They are not asking for endless distance, nor are they rejecting closeness entirely. They are asking for a middle ground where they can connect deeply without feeling controlled. Imagine a dance between two people, one step forward, one step back, each partner moving in rhythm without stepping on the other's toes. That is how intimacy works for someone who fears losing their independence. They need to know that when they take a step back, their partner will not panic or chase them. They need to know that their breathing room is not interpreted as rejection, but respected as part of their rhythm. The shocking truth is that when an avoidant feels safe enough to keep their independence, they often become some of the most loyal and deeply loving partners. They may not always express affection in the most obvious ways, but their commitment runs deep once they know they won't be smothered. They want to know that they can be loved without having to surrender the parts of themselves that keep them whole. And when they find that balance, they begin to lean into intimacy more openly, because the very thing they feared, closeness, no longer feels like a threat. It feels like partnership. It feels like home. In the end, the avoidant's secret longing is not so different from anyone else's. They want to be loved. They want to be understood. They want to feel close. But they want to experience all of that while still feeling free to be themselves. Independence is not the opposite of intimacy. It is the foundation that allows intimacy to last. And once we understand that, we can see avoidants not as people running away from love, but as people searching for a way to love without losing themselves in the process. Their withdrawal often comes from fear of being trapped, judged, or losing themselves. When someone with avoidant tendencies pulls back in a relationship, it is easy to mistake it as coldness or rejection, but beneath the surface there is almost always a storm of emotions they rarely voice. To understand this pattern, we have to look at the roots of fear itself. Many avoidants grew up learning that closeness comes with conditions, or that love means pressure, or that showing need will lead to disappointment. When they retreat, they are not necessarily running from their partner, they are running from the possibility of repeating old pain. Fear of being trapped shows up as resistance to commitment or reluctance to define the relationship. This does not mean they do not value the bond, but the very idea of being locked in triggers alarms in their mind. They imagine losing their independence, their ability to make choices freely, or even their identity. For them, the label or the expectation attached to a relationship can feel like chains rather than security. Their instinct is to protect their freedom, but in doing so, they sometimes create the very distance that makes their partner feel unwanted. This cycle deepens the misunderstanding. One person is seeking reassurance, while the other is fighting to breathe. The fear of judgment is another powerful force behind their withdrawal. Avoidants often worry that if they reveal their true self, flaws, insecurities, or imperfections, they will be criticized, misunderstood, or even rejected. It is easier to hide behind distance than to risk showing vulnerability. They may silence their needs or downplay their emotions to avoid being seen as weak or needy. To a partner, this can appear as emotional unavailability, but in truth it is self-protection. They long to be accepted for who they are without scrutiny, yet they struggle to trust that such unconditional acceptance exists. Then there is the fear of losing themselves, which can be the deepest wound of all. Many avoidants have a strong need for autonomy, and when intimacy deepens, they feel as if their personal boundaries are at risk of dissolving. They fear being consumed by the relationship to the point that their own goals, dreams, and identity fade away. To them, love should enhance life, not replace it. When they sense that the relationship might demand too much, their survival instinct tells them to retreat. This withdrawal is not about wanting less connection, but about protecting the essence of who they are. The tragedy is that these fears often push away the very love they desire. Partners misinterpret the distance as lack of interest, while the avoidant secretly hopes someone will understand their need for both closeness and space. Breaking this cycle requires compassion on both sides. The avoidant must learn that withdrawing is not the only way to protect themselves, and their partner must recognize that pressure and pursuit only feed the fear. What truly helps is creating an environment where trust grows slowly, where vulnerability is met with patience, and where independence is honored alongside intimacy. At its core, withdrawal is not rejection, it is a cry for safety. When avoidants feel that love does not threaten their freedom, when they believe they will not be judged for showing who they are, when they trust that intimacy does not mean erasure, they begin to lean in. They begin to see that love and independence are not enemies but allies. The fear that once pushed them away becomes the very compass guiding them toward a healthier connection. And in that moment, the truth reveals itself. Avoidants do not want to escape love. They want to experience a love that allows them to stay without losing themselves. The right relationship for an avoidant is one that balances closeness with freedom, and that balance is not always easy to create. For someone who tends to withdraw when emotions run deep, love can feel like walking a tightrope. On one side, there is connection, warmth, and intimacy, and on the other side, there is independence, autonomy, and self-protection. What makes it challenging is that both sides are essential. Too much closeness without room to breathe feels suffocating, but too much distance without any vulnerability feels hollow. The truth is that an avoidant does not actually want to live at either extreme. What they deeply desire is the space to lean into love without fearing they will lose themselves. When people think of love, they often imagine constant togetherness, endless communication, and constant reassurances. For an avoidant, however, that kind of intensity can trigger alarms. They may interpret it as pressure, control, or even danger to their sense of self. But beneath that reaction is not a cold heart. It is a protective reflex. They want closeness, but they want to know they can step back when they need to without being punished for it. The paradox is that the more freedom an avoidant is given, the more likely they are to come closer willingly. Love, for them, must feel like an invitation, not a demand. This is why balance is the foundation. A relationship that honors closeness means showing care, consistency, and vulnerability. It means being open enough to share feelings, fears, and dreams. But it also means recognizing that love is not about possession. For the avoidant, freedom is as necessary as air. That freedom may look like time alone, space to pursue personal goals, or the ability to recharge without guilt. When a partner understands that space is not rejection, but restoration, the avoidant no longer has to fight for it. And when they no longer have to fight, they begin to relax into the relationship, trusting that their independence will not be stolen. The balance also comes from communication. An avoidant often struggles to articulate their needs because they fear being misunderstood or judged. But when a relationship is built on honesty without pressure, they learn to voice what they need without shutting down. The closeness in this case is not measured by constant availability, but by the safety of knowing that each person can speak the truth without fear of abandonment. Freedom does not weaken the bond, it strengthens it because each partner feels respected as a whole individual. At the heart of it all, what avoidants want is the chance to experience love without the burden of pretending to be someone they are not. They want to be cared for without being smothered, to be understood without being controlled, and to be free without being left behind. The relationship that works for them is not one that denies intimacy, but one that respects boundaries while still nurturing emotional connection. In that environment, closeness no longer feels like a trap, and freedom no longer feels like isolation. Instead, the two work together, creating a kind of love that is both deep and sustainable. In the end, the shocking truth is simple: avoidants are not against love, and they are not incapable of it. They are searching for the rare balance where intimacy and independence exist side by side. The right relationship for them is not one that asks them to choose between the two, but one that allows them to have both. And when that balance is found, what emerges is not only safety and trust, but also a love that has the power to last. Avoidants don't want less love, they want love that feels safe enough to stay in. At first glance, it may seem like they are running away from relationships altogether, but the truth is far more complex. Avoidants crave love just as much as anyone else. What they fear is not intimacy itself, but the risk that intimacy will demand more than they can give. They are not rejecting people, they are rejecting the loss of safety, the fear of being swallowed up by expectations, or the possibility of being trapped in a situation where their needs for independence and freedom are ignored. This is why they appear to retreat. It's not because they don't want to be loved, because they are deeply protective of their own space. When love feels safe, an avoidant can begin to soften. The walls they build are not impenetrable, they are defenses against past experiences that taught them closeness equals pain. If someone grew up in an environment where emotional connection felt overwhelming, where expressing needs was dismissed, or where vulnerability led to disappointment, then love as an adult can easily feel like a threat. The avoidant withdraws because they expect the pattern to repeat, and withdrawing is their shield. But behind that shield is a longing to be seen, understood, and cherished without the fear of being judged or suffocated. The challenge is that avoidants often send mixed signals. They may lean in, express affection, and then suddenly pull away. This cycle confuses their partners, who start to believe that the avoidant doesn't care or doesn't want the relationship. In reality, the opposite is true. The avoidant pulls back because they care so deeply that the closeness makes them vulnerable, and vulnerability terrifies them. They fear that if they stay too close for too long, they will lose themselves in the relationship. They fear that their independence, the very core of their identity, will be stripped away. What they desire is not a love that overwhelms, but a love that coexists with their individuality. For love to feel safe enough for an avoidant to stay, it must be built on respect. Respect for boundaries, respect for silence, and respect for personal space. When a partner demonstrates that they are not trying to control or cage the avoidant, a transformation begins to happen. The avoidant learns slowly that closeness does not equal loss. They begin to trust that love can be both intimate and freeing. They learn that connection does not have to erase their sense of self. This trust is fragile, but once established, it allows the avoidant to show sides of themselves that rarely surface: tenderness, deep loyalty, and a capacity for love that runs far deeper than appearances suggest. Avoidants do not want constant reassurance, nor do they want endless distance. What they want is balance. They want to know that they can take a step back when overwhelmed without being punished for it, and that when they step forward again, they will not be met with resentment. They want a love that is steady, patient, and non-demanding. A love that gives them the room to breathe, and yet the comfort of knowing someone is still there. The shocking truth is that they don't want less love, they want better love. They want a love that doesn't feel like a trap, but like a sanctuary. When that kind of love is offered, the avoidant no longer has to fight between connection and freedom. They begin to realize that true intimacy does not take away their independence, it enhances it. With the right partner and the right environment, avoidants stop running. They stop seeing love as a danger and start experiencing it as a gift. What they wanted all along was not distance, but safety, the kind of safety that makes staying feel not just possible, but natural.